Hello. For those who don't know me, my name is Sam, and I met Sue in 1995 when I arrived in Bangkok with my husband Rob at the tender age of 24. As you can imagine, it was a daunting prospect to make a home in a foreign city without any friends or family. We lived in a hotel while Rob worked as an engineer 6 days out of 7, and by week 2, I thought it was the worst decision I'd ever made. That school of thought changed in an instant when one evening a group of engineers gathered in the hotel bar, and from within the circle of predominantly men, a Geordie accent sailed across the crowd, pricking my lonely ears. It took me a few seconds to locate where it was coming from, and then my eyes locked on the pint-sized blonde with a sweeping fringe, ciggy in hand, holding court with the men. I'd never met a Geordie before. The accent was unfamiliar, but at that point, I was prepared to make friends with anyone. However, it only took a few minutes to realise Sue was far from just anyone. She looked at me, saw me standing awkwardly and smiled. "Sam?" she asked. I nodded. "Get a drink and come over." And in that sentence, one of the most beautiful friendships I've ever been fortunate enough to have was born. Sue was a force of nature. She was loud, direct, and firm in her opinions, as well as hilarious, loving, and intrinsically kind. She never made excuses. If she didn't want to do something, she wouldn't fashion reasons. She'd simply say no. Resultingly, I always knew where I stood with her. She took away onus for conflict by saying exactly what she thought and felt. Her unique brand of integrity never wavered. She wasn't afraid of truth or power, and spoke back to the latter regularly. Her social media pages were testimony to this. She complained to me once how when she made a cake and posted a picture of it, she received a multitude of likes, whereas posts highlighting inequality and injustice received only a few. I suggested she post the political ones less frequently. Perhaps that might have more impact. "Never," she retorted. You see, it wasn't about generating likes for Sue. It was about counteracting tabloid newspaper headlines. Propaganda that mattered to her. It was a mission, and she was steadfast and relentless in her crusade to give voice to those without one. It broke her heart how people voted based on the fear of minority groups, peddled by corporations and governments who pushed their own interests to the detriment of others. Sue wasn't afraid of the unfamiliar. She embraced the vibrant nature of difference and sought it out in us all. Our quirks, our vulnerabilities, and our experiences of life were the attributes she valued and championed in us. She held limited value on material possessions, happier buying clothes in a charity shop than on a high street. Having said that, she did develop a small addiction to Amazon over COVID, with packages arriving daily, mostly gifts for others and treats for Elfie. COVID was not kind to Sue. Being sick and confined took away some of her sparkle. She felt caged and trapped, like a bird whose wings had been clipped. It was her friends and family who got her through. Meals delivered, fresh produce arriving on her doorstep, friends visiting, distancing safely in her garden, video calls, texts and televisions became staples of this new life. She was swamped with love, kindness and concern. Nothing was too much trouble for her family and her community. Everyone kept her afloat for as long as she wished to sail. In the end, she grew weary. I was lucky enough to spend a few weeks with her before she died, the highlight of this time being a trip to the Mumbles. Sue said she wanted to feel the sea air against her skin, smell the salt carried in the breeze, and let her eyes feast on the coastline one last time. She was frail, unsteady on her feet, but I held her close to my body and we stood, inhaled and looked together toward the grey mist, our eyes teary from the wind, but mostly because we both knew neither of us would stand in such a place together ever again. When I left, she and Gary dropped me to the train station. She got out of the car, told me she loved me and hugged me for the last time. I watched her drive off, her eyes glancing backwards to me and then settling on the road ahead. She knew her time left was short. She was a little frightened by the prospect, but mostly sad at leaving behind her precious people and Alfie. However, there was still a wee spark in her eyes, generated by her strong sense of spirituality and the answering of unknown questions about what lay beyond. "Bye, Sue," I whispered knowingly as the car disappeared. Then a few weeks later she was gone, a peaceful death surrounded by her sisters in life, an ever-present Gary and her adoring Alfie. She died facing her beloved view, green grass on the mountain, daffodils in bloom, a spectacular show curated just for her by nature. It comforted me to think when she left us, as we all said goodbye, there was a parallel world where her mum, dad, brothers and Auntie Lil were all smiling, arms outstretched saying, "Here she comes. Here comes our Sue." There are so many of us who claim big stakes in her heart. It was a huge heart with an interior of marshmallow. It was strong with a steady, dependable beat. A place we all turned to when we needed reassurance, direction, and endorphins of the feel-good kind. It was warm and safe. And though I miss it in an aching, gaping way, I'm going to try and open my own heart wider and do for others what she did for all of us. Make people feel they are seen, loved, and celebrated simply for being who they are. Rest in peace, my darling, funny, principled Sue. I love you with all I have.